Billionaire's wife collapses on street. Black man saves her with CPR. Husband grateful. Welcome to the No Justice Nation for more amazing stories. It was supposed to be just another busy afternoon in the city. The sidewalks buzz with people on lunch breaks, taxis honking in traffic, and the usual chatter of urban life echoing off tall buildings. No one expected what was about to unfold right there on the street corner. She was dressed in elegance, pearls around her neck, designer sunglasses, and heels that clicked with every graceful step. Eleanor Hartley, wife of tech billionaire Richard Hartley, was known not just for her fashion, but for her philanthropy, her presence often gracing charity galas and red carpets. But that afternoon, everything changed in an instant. Eleanor stumbled, clutching her chest. People turned. Some stopped. A few pulled out their phones. And then she collapsed, flat on the pavement. No movement, no breath. Gasps filled the air. Cars screeched to a halt. A woman screamed. No one moved, except one man. His name? Jamal Green, a 27-year-old delivery driver just finishing his route, wearing a faded green jacket, worn-out sneakers, and earbuds still pumping old-school hip-hop into his ears. He didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He ran, dropped to his knees beside the lifeless woman, and checked her pulse. Nothing. She wasn't breathing. While others stood frozen, uncertain, or indifferent, Jamal moved into action. He pulled his phone from his pocket with one hand and called 911. With the other, he tilted her head back, opened her airway, and began CPR. The mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, the chest compressions, the sweat forming on his brow, the counting, the rhythm, the hope, and still nothing until a breath, a weak cough. Her chest rose. She blinked. People gasped again, but this time in relief. Paramedics rushed in moments later. But the work, the life-saving moment, had already happened. By a stranger. By a black man that most of the crowd had ignored moments earlier. Scene transition. Hospital room. Night. Richard Hartley, the billionaire himself, sat beside his wife's bed, his face pale, his hands trembling. She was going to be okay, thanks to a man he'd never met. He asked to see Jamal. He asked to meet the man who saved his wife's life. And when Jamal walked into the hospital room, awkward and unsure, Richard didn't hesitate. He stood, walked across the floor, and hugged him. Tears ran down his face. "You saved the love of my life," Richard whispered. And in that moment, race, status, and background faded. All that mattered was the humanity that brought them together. The sidewalks of that city had seen everything. Ambition, struggle, beauty, tragedy. But rarely did they see courage as selfless as what Jamal displayed that day. He didn't ask who she was. Didn't ask if she was rich. Didn't care what others thought. He saw someone in trouble, and he acted. But as the ambulance pulled away and crowds slowly dispersed, something else lingered in the air, a kind of shame. Because most people had stood still. Many recorded. Few helped. Only Jamal stepped up. And that stuck with people. The headlines didn't hold back the next morning. Billionaire's wife collapses on sidewalk, saved by local delivery driver. He risked everything to save a stranger. Bystanders watched. He acted. And Jamal? He returned to work the next day like nothing happened. Jamal Green lived in a modest apartment on the west side of town. Raised by his grandmother after losing both parents in a car accident when he was just 6. Life hadn't been easy. But Jamal? He was a fighter. He worked 2 jobs, delivery driver by day, security guard by night. He dreamed of going back to school, becoming a paramedic. Ironically, the CPR he'd used on Eleanor, he learned it volunteering at a local youth center years ago. The same center that had saved him from the streets. Jamal didn't seek recognition, didn't expect praise, but it found him anyway. Richard Hartley wasn't a man easily shaken. Known as one of the sharpest minds in Silicon Valley, he had built his empire from scratch. He knew risk. He understood pressure. But seeing his wife lifeless on that hospital bed, that broke him. When reporters asked him for a statement, Richard didn't talk about his wealth or fame. He said one name, Jamal Green. "I owe that man more than I can ever repay," Richard told reporters. "He gave me back my wife, my family, my everything." And when asked how he planned to thank Jamal, Richard said simply, "Wait and see." Jamal didn't expect a call. He was loading crates into his van when his phone rang. "Mr. Green, this is Richard Hartley's office. He'd like to meet with you personally." Jamal thought it was a prank. But later that day, a black town car pulled up outside his apartment. A chauffeur opened the door, and Jamal, still in his worn sneakers and hoodie, was whisked away to the Hartley estate. The mansion stood like something from a movie. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls of glass and gold. And in the center of it all, Richard and Eleanor waited. She was smiling, alive. "I wanted to meet the man who gave me a second chance at life," she said, her voice full of emotion. Richard stepped forward, shook Jamal's hand, and pulled him into a hug once again. And then Richard made an announcement. "I don't just want to thank you, Jamal," Richard began. "I want to invest in you." He handed Jamal a folder. Inside, an offer, a full scholarship, to the best medical school in the country, all expenses paid. And not just that, Richard offered Jamal a job shadowing real paramedics and emergency responders at his company's private medical wing. "Anything you need," Richard said. "Housing, books, transportation. We'll take care of it. You gave us life. Let us give you a future." Jamal was speechless. He had saved a life, and now his own life was changing forever. The story exploded across social media. Hashtag thank you, Jamal. Hashtag real life hero. Hashtag CPR saves lives. People were inspired. Interviews flooded in. Talk shows called. News outlets ran his story around the clock. And everywhere he went, people wanted to shake his hand. Young black boys saw Jamal and felt pride. Communities organized free CPR training in his name. One child told a reporter, "I want to be like Jamal when I grow up." And all Jamal kept saying was the same thing. "I just did what anyone should do." But behind the headlines, something else was happening. Jamal's story was stirring conversations. Why had so many people just stood and watched Eleanor collapse? Why had only one man, poor black and ignored, stepped forward? Why did the city seem so quick to look away? Journalists dug deeper. They found video footage showing some bystanders walking around Eleanor's body, some even stepping over her. Commentators called it bystander apathy, but others call it what it really was, bias. Some admitted they saw Jamal running toward her and assumed he was a threat, not a helper. One man even said, "I thought he was going to steal her purse." That hurt Jamal more than anything. In a rare move, Richard Hartley held a press conference. But instead of talking about Jamal's heroism again, he addressed something else. "Our world is broken in how we perceive people," he began. "Too often, we judge by skin color, by clothes, by economic status. I know that if Jamal had hesitated, even for a moment, my wife might not be here." He paused. And yet, many people hesitated to believe in him. He looked straight into the camera. "We must do better." Out of that moment, a movement was born. Richard and Eleanor, with Jamal's blessing, launched a Green Initiative, a foundation to provide emergency training, scholarships, and racial bias education across the country. They funded free CPR classes in underprivileged communities. They partnered with schools and hospitals. And Jamal became the face of the campaign. Not a celebrity, not a millionaire, but a regular guy with an extraordinary heart. 2 years later, Jamal stood in a white coat, graduation day, paramedic badge pinned to his chest. His grandmother sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. Richard and Eleanor were there too, clapping proudly. As Jamal took the stage to speak, he looked out at the crowd. He didn't talk about being a hero. He talked about responsibility. "Don't wait for someone else to step in," he said. "Be the one. Be the first, even when no one else moves." And as he stepped down, a standing ovation followed. The man who once saved a life was now ready to save many more. The moment Jamal's story broke, he became an instant media sensation. News anchors praised him. Influencers reposted his photos, and talk show invitations flooded in. But with fame came pressure. Some people, still caught in their biases, questioned the story. He was just in the right place at the right time, they claimed. Others whispered backhanded compliments. He's surprisingly well-spoken. He looks clean-cut for a guy from his neighborhood. Jamal heard it all, and while many embrace him, others struggle to believe that a young black man could be both heroic and humble without an angle. So Jamal did what he always did, kept his head down and his heart open. He accepted interviews not to brag, but to educate, to tell people, I didn't save her because she was rich. I saved her because she was human. And every time he said it, the world listened a little more. But as Jamal's story soared, it also exposed a hard truth. Why did it take a billionaire's wife nearly dying for people to believe in someone like Jamal? Local activists brought attention to this. They held forums titled, Everyday Black Heroes We Ignore. Would you have trusted him if he wasn't saving a rich white woman? Why is saving a life the only way a black man gets seen? Jamal wasn't angry about it. He agreed. He began to speak at some of those forums. He told stories, not just his own, but stories of others who had acted bravely, quietly, and had gone unnoticed. A teen who pulled an elderly neighbor from a burning house. A single mother who saved a stranger with first aid after a car crash. All black, none famous. Until now, Jamal gave them a voice. He used his platform not to elevate himself, but to elevate everyone forgotten. But every movement faces pushback. Some conservative outlets question the foundation. Is this another race-baiting program? They sneered. One headline read, From delivery boy to hero, or just another PR stunt by the rich? Hate mail began to arrive at Jamal's apartment. He was called a fraud, a welfare hero, a token. Jamal's grandmother begged him to keep quiet, to stay out of the spotlight. But he couldn't, because for every hateful message, there were 10 letters from kids who said they now believed they could make a difference too. So Jamal kept going. He spoke truth, even when it hurt, even when it made people uncomfortable. Months later, Jamal was riding the subway when he noticed a man slumped in the seat. People looked, then looked away. Jamal moved instantly, checked his pulse. No breath, no time. He lowered the man gently to the floor, started chest compressions, again and again, until the man gasped for air. Another life saved, another crowd watching. But this time, someone else stepped forward too, a teenager, maybe 16, brown-skinned, inspired. He said, I saw your video. I learned CPR because of you. Jamal smiled, and for the first time, all felt worth it. The Green Initiative continued to grow. National CPR training programs now included cultural bias training. Hospitals opened internship slots specifically for students from underserved neighborhoods. Media began highlighting more everyday heroes, especially those from marginalized communities. All because one man ran when others froze. Because he believed a life was worth saving no matter who it belonged to. The narrative was changing. Slowly, but surely. 1 year to the day since Eleanor's collapse, Richard Hartley wrote an op-ed for the New York Times. He titled it, The Day My Wife Died and Lived Again. In it, he wrote not about his wealth or his business, but about the man who saved his world. I was raised to believe success was measured by power, he wrote. But Jamal taught me that real success is measured by humanity. He ended with this line, If I had all the money in the world and not 1 ounce of Jamal's courage, I'd be bankrupt in what matters most. The article went viral. Jamal eventually finished his medical training, but he didn't stop there. He went on to become a certified EMS trainer, teaching hundreds across the country. He opened his own community response center in his neighborhood. Free CPR and first aid training for anyone who walked through the door. His motto? Don't wait. Don't watch. Step up. He could have cashed in, signed book deals, moved to Hollywood, but he stayed grounded. He still lived in the same neighborhood, drove the same beat-up car, still wore that old green jacket sometimes, because Jamal knew what mattered, and it wasn't the applause. Years later, Jamal visited the Hartley family again. They'd become close. Richard treated him like a son. Eleanor called him family. They sat on the back porch one evening, drinking iced tea and watching the sun go down. "Jamal," Richard said, "if you hadn't shown up that day, I wouldn't be sitting here right now." Jamal nodded. "But I did, and that's all that counts." Richard leaned back. "I hope you know how many lives you've changed." Jamal looked out across the yard, where kids from the community were playing soccer, many of them scholarship recipients from the Green Initiative. "I don't need a statue," he said quietly. "Just a world that doesn't hesitate next time." Years after Jamal's passing, a mural was painted in his honor. It wasn't placed in some gallery or behind velvet ropes. It was on the same sidewalk where Eleanor once collapsed. It showed Jamal kneeling, giving CPR, surrounded by people of all colors and backgrounds stepping in beside him. And at the top in bold letters were his own words. "Don't wait. Don't watch. Step up." Children pass by and ask their parents, "Who is he?" And their parents answer, "He was the reason we learn how to help." In a world where people too often look away, one man chose to act. In a moment when status didn't matter, one man saw only a human life in need. And in doing so, he changed lives, minds, and the course of a nation. This is Jamal Green's story. This is what happens when compassion is stronger than fear. This is No Justice Nation. Like my video and subscribe my channel for more daily videos.